Sergeant Amelia Reeves stood at attention, her spine rigid as steel, yet her heart pounded like a war drum against her ribcage. The Marines' combat training facility stretched before her, a sprawling complex of obstacle courses, firing ranges, and training grounds where the nation's finest warriors were forged through sweat and determination. Today, however, the facility would witness something unprecedented, a direct challenge to one of the Corps' most deeply entrenched traditions. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. At 28, Amelia had already distinguished herself with extraordinary service across 3 combat deployments. Her record spoke of unwavering courage under fire and tactical brilliance that had saved countless lives. Her nickname Phantom wasn't earned lightly. It came from her uncanny ability to move silently through hostile territory, completing reconnaissance missions that others deemed impossible. Yet despite her proven record, there remained one barrier she couldn't seem to overcome: access to the Marine Corps' elite Advanced Combat Instructor program. Brigadier General Walter Hargrove paced before the assembled officers, his weathered face bearing the hardened expression of a man who had commanded troops through 2 decades of conflict. At 57, he personified traditional Marine Corps leadership, unyielding, uncompromising, and deeply committed to methods that had produced generations of elite warriors. His silver-gray hair and battle-earned scars told stories of conflicts that had shaped modern military doctrine. Amelia stepped forward, her gaze never wavering as she addressed the general. "Sir, I'm formally requesting consideration for the Advanced Combat Instructor Certification Program." Her voice carried across the room with clarity and conviction that belied the tension crackling in the air. Behind her impeccable uniform and perfect regulation hair, her mind raced through the meticulous preparation she'd undertaken for this moment. The training room fell silent. Several senior officers exchanged knowing glances while others kept their expressions carefully neutral. This wasn't just about program assignment, it was about challenging an unspoken barrier that had existed since the program's inception. No woman had ever been admitted to the elite instructor cadre that shaped Marine Corps' combat training doctrine. General Hargrove's expression shifted subtly. What began as mild surprise transformed into something Amelia recognized immediately: amusement. It wasn't the encouraging smile of a leader recognizing potential, but the condescending smirk of someone who'd just heard something they found absurdly entertaining. "Sergeant Reeves," Hargrove said, his voice carrying just enough volume to ensure everyone present could hear, "the XEI program isn't some administrative position. It requires demonstrating advanced combat proficiency against the Corps' most skilled fighters. It demands physical capabilities that, frankly, you simply haven't demonstrated." The dismissal hit Amelia like physical impact. Around her, she noticed several senior instructors nodding in agreement. Master Sergeant James Thornton, Hargrove's protege and the program's lead instructor, didn't even attempt to hide his smirk. "Sir, with respect," Amelia continued, determined not to let this opportunity slip away, "my combat record and qualification scores demonstrate. Your scores demonstrate proficiency in standard requirements." Hargrove interrupted, his tone growing sharper. "The ACHI program requires exceptional performance under extreme pressure. Perhaps in another few years, after you've gained more experience with conventional combat roles." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The room's atmosphere shifted completely. What should have been a professional discussion about qualifications had become something else entirely. Amelia could feel the eyes of her fellow Marines, some sympathetic, others clearly agreeing with Hargrove's assessment. She had prepared for rejection based on objective standards, but not for public humiliation. "General, my record includes leading a 12-person team through 72 hours of continuous combat operations in Helmand Province. Amelia said, her voice steady despite the burning in her cheeks. We sustained 0 casualties while completing all mission objectives. Hargrove's expression hardened. Sergeant Reeves, combat operations are different from instructor qualifications. This program requires demonstrating advanced hand-to-hand combat techniques against opponents who outweigh you by 50 pounds or more. It requires physical strength that most women simply don't possess. The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it was audible enough for Amelia to hear. Master Sergeant Thornton whispered something to the instructor beside him, and more quiet. Chuckles rippled through the group. "Yes, sir," she replied crisply, then turned and walked from the briefing room with as much dignity as she could manage. Outside in the corridor, Amelia leaned against the wall and drew a deep breath. This wasn't just about being denied program admission. This was about being publicly humiliated in front of her peers, having her combat experience dismissed without serious consideration, and being told that her proven excellence meant nothing when measured against preconceived notions of physical capability. Staff Sergeant Diana Wilson, one of the few other female combat instructors on base, appeared beside her. "That was brutal," she said quietly. "Hargrove's old school. Doesn't think anyone belongs in advanced roles unless they fit his image of what a Marine combat instructor should look like." "It's not about appearance," Amelia replied, though she appreciated Wilson's support. "I've demonstrated combat effectiveness under the most extreme conditions. I've trained with specialists from 3 different branches. My hand-to-hand qualification scores exceed requirements, but apparently none of that matters." Wilson nodded sympathetically. "The thing is, Amelia, some of us have been watching your innovations in tactical training, your field adaptations, your leadership under pressure. We know you're not just another combat Marine." As they walked toward the training grounds, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that Hargrove's dismissal had been about more than just physical requirements. The way he'd smiled, the public nature of the rejection, the laughter from other instructors, all suggested something deeper than professional assessment. "Diana," Amelia said slowly, "do you think this would have gone differently if I were James Thornton requesting advanced certification instead of me?" Wilson was quiet for a moment, then sighed. "Honestly, probably. Thornton's scores are nowhere near yours, and his actual combat experience is limited. But he fits the image, and Hargrove sees him as carrying on the tradition." That evening, Amelia sat in her quarters reviewing advanced combat techniques from International Special Forces training manuals. Not because she had been admitted to the program, but because she refused to accept that her career trajectory should be determined by someone else's narrow definition of capability. Her father, a retired Marine gunnery sergeant, had taught her that sometimes the most important battles weren't fought in combat zones, but in the moments when others tried to tell you what you couldn't accomplish. The phone rang, interrupting her study session. "Sergeant Reeves, this is Colonel Rebecca Martinez from Training Command. I need to see you in my office at 0700 tomorrow. There's been a development." The following morning, Amelia arrived at Colonel Martinez's office to find the building buzzing with unusual activity. Training officers moved with urgent efficiency. That signaled a developing situation, and the communication systems were running continuously. Martinez, a 20-year veteran with a reputation for no-nonsense leadership, looked more tense than Amelia had ever seen her. "Sergeant Reeves, please." "Sit down," Martinez said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. "What I'm about to tell you is sensitive. The Corps is hosting a Joint Service Advanced Combat Demonstration in 48 hours. The Pentagon's evaluating standardized close-quarters combat protocols across all branches. They specifically requested our best hand-to-hand combat instructors to demonstrate Marine Corps techniques." Amelia leaned forward, her attention completely focused on Martinez's briefing. This was the kind of high-visibility event that shaped military training doctrine across all services, exactly the type of program she had been training to contribute to. Each service branch is sending 5 of their top combat instructors. Martinez continued. The demonstrations will be evaluated by senior military officials for potential adoption into Joint Service Training protocols. General Kerrigan from the Joint Chiefs will be overseeing the evaluation personally. Colonel, this sounds like precisely the kind of program that should involve the Advanced Combat Instructor cadre, Amelia observed. Has General Hargrove selected the demonstration team? Martinez's expression tightened slightly. Hargrove's been leading the selection process. He's chosen Master Sergeant Thornton to head our demonstration team despite recommendations that emphasize the need for instructors with diverse combat experiences and innovative approaches. Master Sergeant Thornton has solid experience with traditional Corps combat methods, Amelia said diplomatically, though privately she questioned whether conventional training would be sufficient for a joint service demonstration where innovation would be crucial for standing out. Thornton is competent, Martinez agreed, but his approach follows established doctrine that hasn't been significantly updated in 15 years. This demonstration requires capabilities that demonstrate evolution in our training methods. Over. The next day, Amelia found herself increasingly frustrated as she watched preparation sessions from the periphery. As part of the training support team, she had access to the demonstration parameters and evaluation criteria, but Hargrove consistently directed strategic discussions toward senior male instructors while ignoring insights that might come from more innovative perspectives. During one particularly tense planning session, Amelia presented detailed analysis showing alternative demonstration sequences that could highlight Marine Corps techniques while addressing the specific evaluation criteria mentioned in the Pentagon's request. Her approach incorporated principles from her diverse combat experience with innovations developed during her reconnaissance operations. Hargrove barely glanced at her work. Sergeant Reeves, combat instruction requires experience with full resistance training against opponents who match the physical profile of potential adversaries. Your analysis is interesting, but this isn't a theoretical exercise. Master Sergeant Thornton nodded in agreement. Sir, the sergeant's reconnaissance background gives her a different perspective, but demonstration protocols require understanding of core combat doctrine that takes years to develop. Amelia felt the familiar burn of frustration as her analysis was dismissed without serious consideration. Around the table, other officers seemed to accept Hargrove's assessment without question, despite the Pentagon's request specifically emphasizing innovative approaches rather than traditional methods. Staff Sergeant Wilson, who had been monitoring the preparation logistics, looked up from her workstation with concern. General, we've received updated parameters from the Joint Chiefs. They're specifically requesting demonstrations that address asymmetrical combat situations techniques effective against larger, stronger opponents. How much time do we have to incorporate these new requirements? Hargrove asked. The demonstration is in 24 hours, Wilson replied. They've expanded the evaluation criteria to include adaptive techniques rather than just traditional approaches. Hargrove turned to Thornton. Master Sergeant, are you prepared to adjust your demonstration to incorporate these new parameters? Thornton hesitated for just a moment too long. Sir, I'll need additional time to modify our approach. The complexity of demonstrating techniques against significantly larger opponents. General, Amelia interrupted, unable to remain silent while watching an opportunity slip away. My analysis already addresses asymmetrical combat situations. The techniques I've outlined are specifically designed for effectiveness when facing larger opponents. Innovation in this area might be more valuable than experience with traditional approaches. The room fell silent. Hargrove's expression hardened as he looked at Amelia, and she could feel the disapproval of senior instructors who clearly felt she had overstepped professional boundaries. Sergeant Reeves, Hargrove said with barely controlled irritation, You seem to have missed the point of your role here. You're part of the support team, not the demonstration planning cadre. Your job is to provide logistical assistance, not combat instruction recommendations. The public rebuke stung, especially in front of officers whose respect Amelia had worked years to earn. But as she looked at the demonstration parameters showing specific requirements that traditional approaches weren't designed to address, she realized that this wasn't about her career aspirations anymore. This was about representing the Corps effectively in a crucially important joint service evaluation. That evening, Amelia remained in her office long after other Marines had gone home, studying every detail of the demonstration parameters and evaluation criteria. If Hargrove was determined to exclude her from operational consideration, she would at least ensure that her analysis was so thorough and innovative that ignoring it would become impossible. Wilson appeared in her doorway. Around midnight. Amelia, you need to see this. We just received the final roster of demonstration participants from the other branches. The Army's sending 2 female Rangers who specialize in close-quarters combat. The Air Force has a female combat controller who trained with Israeli Defense Forces. Even the Navy has a female instructor from their close-quarters defense program. Amelia looked at the updated roster and felt her stomach tighten. The Marine Corps would be the only service branch without female representation in a demonstration specifically designed to evaluate combat effectiveness across different physical profiles. Diana, we need to brief Hargrove on this immediately. I already tried. He said to include it in tomorrow's final briefing and continue with current demonstration planning. Wilson paused, then added quietly, Amelia, some of us think Hargrove's making a mistake. This demonstration needs someone who can adapt quickly and demonstrate innovative approaches, not someone who follows established procedures that were designed for different combat scenarios. As Amelia walked back to her quarters, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was watching a strategic mistake unfold in slow motion. The most important joint service demonstration in years was being planned by people who seemed determined to ignore both the specific evaluation criteria and the innovative approaches that might ensure the Marine Corps made a strong showing. But tomorrow's briefing would give her one more opportunity to present her analysis, and she intended to make it impossible to dismiss. The final briefing began at 0600 hours with tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Overnight analysis had confirmed Amelia's concerns. The Joint Chiefs were specifically looking for combat techniques that addressed the reality of modern warfare, where size and strength disparities were common, and adaptability was essential. General Hargrove stood before the assembled officers, his weathered face showing the strain of preparing for a high-visibility demonstration that could influence military training doctrine for years to come. Master Sergeant Thornton sat at the photon briefing table looking increasingly uncomfortable as the finalized evaluation criteria continued to emphasize innovative approaches over traditional methods. Ladies and gentlemen, Hargrove began, as you know, the Joint Chiefs will be evaluating our combat demonstration tomorrow. The primary objective is to showcase Marine Corps' hand-to-hand combat effectiveness and the superiority of our training. Methods. Amelia raised her hand. Sir, the updated parameters specifically emphasize adaptive techniques for asymmetrical combat scenarios. The evaluation criteria focus on innovative approaches rather than traditional methods. Hargrove's expression hardened. Sergeant Reeves, you've made your position clear. However, Master Sergeant Thornton has extensive experience with our established combat protocols that this demonstration requires. General, Amelia persisted, knowing she was risking her career, but unable to remain silent while watching what appeared to be demonstration, planning based on institutional bias rather than objective reality. With respect, sir, extensive experience. With techniques that the Joint Chiefs have specifically indicated they want to see evolve, might actually be a disadvantage in this situation. The room fell completely silent. Several officers exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly recognizing that Amelia had crossed a line from tactical discussion into direct challenge of Hargrove's judgment. Master Sergeant Thornton's face flushed, with anger at the implication that his experience might be inadequate. "Sergeant Reeves," Hargrove said, his voice carrying dangerous calm, "you seem to believe that your limited combat instruction experience qualifies you to question decisions made by officers with decades of relevant service. That level of arrogance is precisely why this program requires maturity that you haven't demonstrated." The public humiliation was even worse than the previous dismissal. Amelia could feel her fellow Marines' embarrassment on her behalf, but also their agreement with Hargrove's assessment. In their eyes, she had confirmed exactly what the general had said about her lack of readiness for advanced instruction roles. "Furthermore," Hargrove continued, his voice rising slightly, "your persistent attempts to insert yourself into planning that clearly exceeds your qualifications raises questions about your judgment and professionalism. Perhaps reassignment to a role more appropriate to your experience level would be beneficial for everyone involved." Amelia felt her world collapse. Hargrove wasn't just rejecting her tactical analysis. He was threatening her career for having presented it. The implication that she might be reassigned away from combat instruction entirely was unmistakable, and everyone in the room understood the significance. Master Sergeant Thornton seized the moment to solidify his position. "General Hargrove, I appreciate Sergeant Reeves' enthusiasm, but demonstration protocols require understanding of core combat doctrine that fighter experience simply doesn't provide. I'm confident that my approach will achieve demonstration objectives while maintaining Corps' tradition." Colonel Martinez, who had been monitoring the updated parameters throughout the discussion, looked up with obvious concern. "General, I need to report that the Joint Chiefs representative has clarified their expectations. They specifically want to see techniques that address realistic combat scenarios where Marines might face physically superior opponents. They're particularly interested in innovations that go beyond our standard training methods." Hargrove turned to Thornton. "Master Sergeant, can you adjust your demonstration to incorporate these specific requirements?" Thornton hesitated, and Amelia could see doubt in his expression despite his previous confidence. "Sir, the accelerated timeline creates significant challenges. Optimal demonstration planning requires coordination with support elements and contingency." "Preparation." "Master Sergeant," Hargrove interrupted, "I need a direct answer. Can you meet these specific requirements by tomorrow's demonstration?" The silence stretched painfully as Thornton struggled with the reality that his conventional approach might not be viable under the revised criteria. Amelia watched this crucial moment unfold, knowing that everything depended on what happened next. "Sir," Thornton finally said, "I believe the demonstration can proceed, but I cannot guarantee that our traditional methods will fully address the asymmetrical combat scenarios they're specifically requesting." Staff Sergeant Wilson stood up. "General, I've just received word that the other service branches have submitted their final demonstration rosters. Every other branch has included female instructors specifically to address the asymmetrical combat requirements." Amelia couldn't remain silent any longer. "General Hargrove, sir, this demonstration requires someone who can adapt techniques in real time to address asymmetrical situations. My reconnaissance background and close quarters combat experience provide exactly the capabilities that the Joint Chiefs have indicated are necessary." Hargrove's face showed barely controlled anger. "Sergeant Reeves, you have repeatedly demonstrated exactly why this program requires officers with proven judgment rather than theoretical qualifications. Your inability to accept command decisions and your persistent disrespect for established protocols make it clear that you're not ready for advanced responsibilities." The general paused, and Amelia could see that he was making a decision that would affect not just this demonstration, but her entire career. "Effective immediately, You are removed from this demonstration support team. Report to Lieutenant Colonel Davis for reassignment to training administration duties, pending review of your fitness for continued combat instruction. The devastating blow hit Amelia like a physical impact. Training administration meant removal from direct combat instruction. Fitness review meant potential end of her combat leadership path. Hargrove hadn't just rejected her for this demonstration. He had essentially ended her future as a combat instructor because she had dared to question his judgment. As Amelia left the briefing room in stunned silence, she could hear continued discussion about demonstration planning with Thornton. But she also heard something else in the voices around the table: doubt. Despite Hargrove's confidence in traditional approaches, the updated parameters had made it clear that this demonstration required capabilities that established doctrine might not provide. Staff Sergeant Wilson caught up with her in the hallway. "Amelia, that was brutal." Hargrove completely overreacted. "It doesn't matter now," Amelia replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "My career is essentially over." "Maybe not," Wilson said quietly. "Some of us have been watching this situation develop, and we think Hargrove's making a strategic mistake. The Joint Chiefs clearly want to see innovative techniques, not traditional methods." Amelia looked at her friend with surprise. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that sometimes the right thing to do professionally isn't the same as the right thing to do operationally. Hargrove's decision might protect traditional command structure, but it might not show the corps in the best light tomorrow." As they walked toward the administrative offices where Amelia would report for what might be the end of her combat instruction career, she realized that Wilson was right. This wasn't just about her personal ambitions anymore. This was about a critical demonstration that could determine the future of Marine Corps' combat training. And she believed that Hargrove's approach was based more on institutional bias than tactical reality. "Deanna," she said quietly, "what if there was a way to demonstrate that innovative approaches could succeed where traditional techniques might fall short?" Wilson stopped walking and looked at Amelia with sudden understanding. "You're talking about something that could end your career permanently if it goes wrong." "My career is already over," Amelia replied. "Hargrove made that clear. But the Corps still needs to make a strong showing tomorrow, and I believe I have capabilities that could ensure its success." As they stood in the hallway outside the administrative offices, Amelia realized that she faced a defining moment of her entire military service. She could accept Hargrove's decision and spend the rest of her career in administrative roles. Or she could find a way to prove that innovation and adaptive thinking were more valuable than traditional approaches when facing the challenges of modern combat. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Amelia reported to Lieutenant Colonel Davis's office as ordered, but her mind was racing with possibilities she couldn't ignore. Davis, a career training administrator with a reputation for fairness, seemed genuinely surprised by Hargrove's decision to remove her from combat instruction. "Sergeant Reeves," Davis said after reviewing the transfer orders, "this seems unusually harsh for tactical disagreement during demonstration planning. Your record shows exemplary performance and innovation in combat operations. Colonel, General Hargrove believes my approach to combat instruction lacks the maturity required for advanced demonstrations." Amelia replied diplomatically, though. Privately, she was analyzing demonstration schedules and facility access protocols. Davis frowned as he read through Amelia's personnel file. "Your combat record and instructor evaluation suggest capabilities that exceed most Marines at your rank level. This administrative assignment appears to be significant underutilization of qualified personnel." While Davis continued reviewing paperwork, Amelia's phone vibrated with a text message from Wilson. "Meet me at training facility 7 after duty hours. Important development. That evening, Amelia found Wilson waiting beside a training station with combat demonstration parameters spread across the table. The facility was nearly empty, with only essential personnel monitoring equipment and conducting routine maintenance. "Amelia, I've been analyzing the demonstration requirements and our combat protocols," Wilson said quietly. "Hargrove's approach with Thornton follows established methods, but the Joint Chiefs parameters specifically request innovations that our traditional techniques don't address." Amelia moved closer to examine the documents. "What did you find?" "Thornton's demonstration profile assumes traditional approaches and defense sequences that don't effectively address the asymmetrical combat scenarios they specifically want to see," Wilson explained. "Your tactical analysis identified techniques that could showcase Marine Corps' adaptability in precisely the situations the Joint Chiefs are evaluating." Amelia studied the demonstration specifications with growing excitement. Her reconnaissance experience allowed her to understand asymmetrical combat at a level that purely traditional training didn't provide, and she could see solutions that conventional doctrine hadn't considered. "Diana, are you suggesting that my approach might actually have higher evaluation scores than Thornton's?" Wilson nodded grimly. "Based on the updated parameters and evaluation criteria, I think traditional techniques have maybe a 50% alignment with what they want to see. Your adaptive approach might have 90% or better. But Hargrove's made his decision. Thornton gets the demonstration, and I get administrative duties." "That's where things get interesting," Wilson said, pulling out a classified update. "Thornton has been experiencing physical issues during preparation. Medical reports indicate he's developed severe back spasms that require at least 24 hours of recovery." Amelia felt her pulse quicken. "But the demonstration is in less than 18 hours. "Exactly. Hargrove's going to have to choose between proceeding with a compromised lead demonstrator or finding someone else qualified for advanced combat techniques. There are other experienced combat instructors available," Amelia pointed out. Wilson shook her head. "Sergeant Maxwell is deployed overseas. Staff Sergeant Williams is on medical leave after his accident last month. Sergeant Peterson doesn't have current certification for the specific techniques the Joint Chiefs want to see." Amelia began to understand the implications. "You're saying I might be one of the few instructors immediately available with the technical knowledge and combat experience necessary for this demonstration?" "I'm saying that Hargrove's institutional biases might be overruled by operational necessity," Wilson replied. "But only if someone can demonstrate that alternative. Approaches offer better presentation potential than proceeding with compromised traditional assets." Amelia looked at the demonstration parameters and evaluation criteria spread across the table. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. Sometimes one demonstration can change perceptions across an entire organization. The responsibility that comes with representing the Corps is greater than the skill required to execute the techniques. "Diana, what if I could prove that innovative techniques would succeed where established methods might fall short?" "How would you do that?" Amelia pulled out her tablet and began mapping technique sequences and demonstration parameters based on her combat experience and instructor knowledge. "Training videos. If I can demonstrate technique execution using adaptive methods and match them directly against the Joint Chiefs evaluation criteria, it would provide objective evidence that unconventional approaches might be necessary." Wilson looked intrigued but concerned. "You're talking about recording unauthorized demonstration sequences using classified parameters. If Hargrove finds out, your career is definitely over." "My career is already over," Amelia replied. "But this demonstration needs to succeed, and I believe I have capabilities that could ensure the Corps makes a strong showing. The question is whether you're willing to help me prove it." Wilson was quiet for several minutes, clearly weighing the professional risks against operational necessities. Finally, she sighed and pulled out her access credentials. "The advanced recording systems are available after 2,200 hours. when scheduled training operations shut down. If we're careful, we could record demonstration sequences without triggering security alerts. Amelia felt a surge of hope mixed with determination. This was her chance to prove that innovation could succeed where traditional methods might fall. Short, but it would require perfect execution and absolute discretion. Diana, if this works, if I can demonstrate superior technique execution using adaptive methods, how do we get that information to the right people? Colonel Martinez has been monitoring this situation closely. She's not entirely convinced that Hargrove's approach is optimal, but she needs objective evidence to challenge a general's operational decision. Amelia began gathering the technical documents and demonstration parameters she would need for comprehensive technique recording. Then let's give her that evidence. As they prepared to leave the facility, Wilson grabbed Amelia's arm. You understand that if this doesn't work, if you can't prove superior capability, Hargrove will use it as confirmation that you lack the judgment required for advanced instruction. Amelia looked at her friend with complete conviction. Then I'll just have to make sure it works. Later that night, as Amelia prepared for what might be the most important few hours of her military career, she thought about her father's stories of serving in conditions that broke other Marines and maintaining unit integrity during operations that lasted for days without rest. He had taught her that true capability reveals itself when everything is on the line. Tomorrow she would discover whether innovative thinking could overcome institutional resistance when the Corps' reputation was at stake. Preparing and narrating. This story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. At 2,230 hours, Amelia and Wilson entered the Advanced Combat Training Facility with the kind of careful planning that critical operations required. The facility's sophisticated recording systems could capture any technique, sequence with precision that made video analysis virtually indistinguishable from actual demonstration evaluation. Amelia moved to the center of the training mat, her body relaxed but ready as she prepared to demonstrate techniques that differed significantly from traditional Marine Corps doctrine. Instead of the conventional defensive postures that Thornton would demonstrate, she incorporated adaptive stances that maximized leverage against physically superior opponents. Recording parameters set, Wilson reported from the control station. Demonstration sequences match Joint Chiefs evaluation criteria. Asymmetrical combat scenarios with opponents significantly larger and stronger than the defender. Amelia began her demonstration with approach vectors that differed significantly from conventional training. Her movements flowed with efficient precision as she executed techniques designed specifically for the situations the Joint Chiefs wanted to evaluate. Technique Sequence 1. Defense against frontal grab, Amelia announced as she began her first demonstration sequence. Her combat experience allowed her to calculate leverage points that maximized effectiveness while minimizing the defender's physical requirements. The recording captured every movement with perfect clarity, showing innovative applications of fundamental principles that conventional training hadn't developed. Diana, are you capturing the technical analysis? Amelia asked as she successfully completed her third sequence. Everything's being recorded with full technical breakdown. Your biomechanical efficiency rating is 40% better than standard doctrine, and your leverage application is achieving significantly better results against resistance. Amelia continued through the demonstration sequences, her confidence growing with each successful execution. Her combination of combat experience and innovative thinking was proving ideal for the complex techniques and split-second transitions that effective asymmetrical combat required. Sequence 8 completed, she reported. The techniques are adapting to increasing resistance levels, but the leverage variations are maintaining effectiveness despite the power differential. Wilson monitored technical measurements with growing excitement. Amelia, conventional approaches would have shown diminishing effectiveness by sequence 4. Your techniques are maintaining consistent results regardless of power disparities. The final phase of the recorded demonstration required Amelia to operate against maximum resistance as the simulated opponent used full strength and weight advantage. This was where conventional techniques typically showed significant degradation. Due to overwhelming physical disparity, Amelia approached the final sequences using innovations she developed during the demonstration itself, adapting to increasing resistance in real time rather than following predetermined procedures. Her combat experience proved crucial for understanding how to modify technique execution for optimal effectiveness under extreme conditions. Final sequence completed, Amelia announced as the demonstration concluded. All techniques executed successfully against maximum resistance with complete defensive effectiveness. Wilson stared at the performance data in amazement. Amelia, your demonstrations show consistent effectiveness regardless of resistance level. Standard projections estimated 60% degradation for conventional approaches against maximum resistance. Amelia stepped off the training mat, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. She had proven to herself that innovative techniques could achieve results that traditional methods couldn't match. But now came the harder part, convincing Martinez that the evidence was valid. Diana, we need to get this data to Colonel Martinez immediately. It's almost midnight. The demonstration begins at 0900 hours, assuming Thornton's medical issues don't improve. If we wait until morning briefing, it'll be too late to make changes to the demonstration team. Wilson gathered the recording, data and technical analysis while Amelia prepared a tactical briefing that explained her approach and demonstrated superior technique effectiveness. The evidence was objective and comprehensive, but they both knew that Martinez's reaction would depend on factors beyond technical analysis. Colonel Martinez answered her phone despite the late hour. This is Colonel Martinez. Colonel, this is Staff Sergeant Wilson. We have urgent information regarding tomorrow's joint service demonstration that requires your immediate attention. Martinez paused for only a moment. My office. 15 minutes. When they arrived at Martinez's office, the colonel was already reviewing medical reports that had arrived regarding Thornton's condition. Her expression was grim as she looked up from the classified documents. Sergeant Reeves, Staff Sergeant Wilson, I hope you have good news because the situation has deteriorated further. Master Sergeant Thornton's condition has worsened. Medical has officially recommended his withdrawal from tomorrow's demonstration. Amelia stepped forward with her demonstration recordings. Ma'am, we have evidence that adaptive techniques could achieve superior evaluation scores, even under the joint chief-specific criteria. Martinez examined the technical analysis with the careful attention of an experienced combat officer. These results show significantly better technique effectiveness than conventional approaches. How did you obtain this data? Unauthorized demonstration recordings using classified parameters, Amelia admitted. Ma'am, I know this violated protocol, but I believe the Corps' representation in tomorrow's evaluation justified exploring alternative approaches. Martinez continued studying the data for several minutes while Amelia and Wilson waited anxiously. Finally, she looked up with an expression that mixed approval with concern. Sergeant Reeves, your demonstration performance shows capabilities that exceed established doctrine. However, unauthorized recordings don't automatically translate to official demonstration approval. Ma'am, the demonstration parameters match the Joint Chiefs' requirements exactly. My approach addresses specific evaluation criteria that conventional techniques weren't designed to address. Martinez nodded slowly. I'm going to present this information to General Hargrove, but you need to understand that challenging his operational decisions based on unauthorized activities could have serious consequences for your career. Amelia straightened to attention. Ma'am, my career is already compromised due to General Hargrove's assessment of my qualifications. But the Corps' representation tomorrow is more important than my personal concerns. Martinez studied her carefully. Sergeant Reeves, are you prepared to stake your entire military future on the belief that your approach offers better demonstration potential than established methods? Amelia thought of her father's stories about leading Marines through operations that required innovative thinking and the ability to adapt to changing conditions with decisive action. She thought of the Joint Chiefs evaluating Marine Corps' combat effectiveness against other service branches. Most importantly, she thought of the responsibility that came with representing the kind of excellence that defined Marine Corps' tradition. Yes, ma'am, I am. Martinez picked up her phone. General Hargrove, this is Colonel Martinez. We need an emergency meeting regarding tomorrow's joint service demonstration. I have new information that could affect our presentation approach. The emergency meeting room felt different at 0030 hours than it had during regular operations. General Hargrove arrived looking irritated at being summoned from his quarters, and his expression darkened considerably when he saw Amelia present alongside Colonel Martinez and Staff Sergeant Wilson. Colonel Martinez, Hargrove said tersely, I thought Sergeant Reeves had been reassigned to administrative duties pending review. General, she has information relevant to tomorrow's joint service demonstration that requires your immediate attention. Martinez replied diplomatically. Master Sergeant Thornton's medical situation has deteriorated significantly since yesterday's planning session. Hargrove's jaw tightened as he took his seat. Colonel, Captain Blake has already demonstrated that her judgment regarding combat instruction is questionable at best. I'm not sure what additional input she could provide that would be relevant to tomorrow's demonstration. Amelia felt her heart racing, but her voice remained steady as she addressed the general directly. Sir, I have evidence that adaptive techniques could achieve superior evaluation scores under the Joint Chiefs' specific criteria. Evidence? Hargrove's tone carried obvious skepticism. What kind of evidence could you possibly have regarding advanced combat instruction? Amelia placed the demonstration recordings on the briefing table. Sir, comprehensive technique. Analysis using current demonstration parameters and combat effectiveness measurements. The data shows that innovative approaches could complete this demonstration with significantly higher evaluation scores than established techniques. Hargrove glanced at the documents without examining them closely. Sergeant Reeves, unauthorized. Recordings aren't equivalent to approved demonstration protocols. The complexity of joint service evaluations requires experience that independent exercises can't replicate. General, Colonel Martinez interjected, the performance data deserves serious consideration. Sergeant Reeves' approach addresses specific evaluation criteria that the Joint Chiefs have emphasized in their updated parameters. Colonel Martinez, we've been planning this demonstration using proven Corps doctrine developed over decades of successful operations. Sergeant Reeves' theoretical innovations aren't adequate substitutes for established procedures that have been tested under actual combat conditions. Amelia could see that Hargrove was dismissing her evidence without genuine evaluation. Just as he had dismissed her tactical analysis during previous briefings, the pattern was becoming unmistakable. The general's resistance wasn't based on objective assessment of capabilities, but on institutional bias that prevented him from considering alternatives to traditional approaches. Sir, Amelia said, struggling to keep her frustration from showing. With respect, the Joint Chiefs evaluation criteria specifically emphasize asymmetrical combat scenarios that conventional techniques weren't designed to address. Traditional methods might have been effective for previous demonstrations, but this situation requires capabilities that established doctrine hasn't developed. Hargrove's expression hardened. Sergeant Reeves, your persistent inability to accept command decisions and your continued disrespect for Corps' hierarchy confirm my assessment that you lack the maturity required for advanced instruction responsibilities. The familiar pattern of public humiliation was beginning again, but this time, Amelia felt something different. Instead of embarrassment and defeat, she felt calm determination. This wasn't about her career anymore. It was about representing the Corps effectively when excellence was the standard. "General Hargrove," she said quietly, "may I ask what Master Sergeant Thornton's current status is regarding tomorrow's demonstration?" Hargrove paused, and Amelia could see uncomfortable recognition in his expression. "Master Sergeant Thornton's medical condition has been diagnosed as acute lumbar spasm that medical estimates will require 72 hours of recovery, and the demonstration begins in approximately 9 hours. Amelia continued, "Sir, what alternative assets are available for immediate assignment?" Martinez consulted her personnel roster. "General, our analysis shows that Sergeant Reeves is one of the only combat instructors currently available with both the advanced technique knowledge and the adaptive experience necessary for the specific parameters the Joint Chiefs have established." The room fell silent as the implications became clear. Hargrove's institutional preferences had led him to plan around Thornton's leadership, but operational reality was forcing him to consider alternatives he had previously rejected on principle. Staff Sergeant Wilson spoke up from her analysis station. "General, overnight communications from the Pentagon indicate that the Joint Chiefs are specifically looking for innovations in asymmetrical combat techniques. Their evaluation team includes special operations veterans specifically tasked with assessing effectiveness against physically superior opponents." Hargrove looked at the demonstration parameters, showing specific requirements that traditional approaches weren't designed to address. Then at the technical analysis that demonstrated Amelia's superior performance. Then finally at Amelia herself. The weight of command decision was visible in his weathered features. "Sergeant Reeves," he said slowly, "even if your demonstration recordings are valid, joint service evaluations involve factors that training exercises can't replicate. Pressure, situations, audience dynamics, inter-service competition. These variables require experience-based judgment that theoretical knowledge doesn't provide." Amelia understood that this was Hargrove's final attempt to maintain his position while acknowledging operational necessity. "Sir, my combat deployments have included operations in contested environments where split-second decisions determined mission success or failure. I've demonstrated the ability to adapt to changing conditions under extreme pressure." "Combat operations," Hargrove replied dismissively. "Tactical engagements that aren't equivalent to representing corps. Doctrine before the Joint Chiefs and senior officers from every service branch." "General," Amelia said, her voice carrying conviction that came from absolute certainty about her capabilities, "my father served 27 years as a Marine instructor. He taught me that the most critical factor in representing the corps isn't just technical skill. It's understanding that sometimes one demonstration can change perceptions across an entire organization. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." Hargrove stared at her for a long moment, and Amelia could see him wrestling with decades of institutional bias against the operational reality he faced. Finally, he turned to Colonel Martinez. "Colonel, what's your professional assessment of Sergeant Reeves' readiness for this demonstration?" Martinez looked directly at Hargrove. "General, based on her technical knowledge, combat record, and innovative tactical approaches, I believe Sergeant Reeves offers the best available option for corps representation under current parameters." "And if she fails?" Hargrove asked. "If she fails," Martinez replied, "the corps makes a poor showing in a critical joint service evaluation. If conventional approaches fail, the outcome is identical, but we'll have missed our best opportunity for effective representation." Hargrove stood up and walked to the tactical display, showing the demonstration parameters and evaluation criteria. The silence stretched for nearly a minute as he considered a decision that could affect not just this demonstration, but potentially corps training doctrine moving forward. "Sergeant Reeves, he said finally without turning around. "If I authorize you for this demonstration, you'll be executing the most visible combat instruction presentation in recent Corps history. The margin for error is essentially zero, and there won't be backup support if your innovative techniques prove inadequate." Amelia felt her heart pounding, but her voice remained steady. "Sir, I understand the stakes. I'm ready to prove that. Analytical thinking and adaptive capabilities can succeed when traditional approaches might not be sufficient." Hargrove turned back to face her. "Sergeant Reeves, you have repeatedly challenged my judgment and questioned established procedures. Your approach to Corps operations shows exactly the kind of arrogance that makes me doubt your readiness for advanced responsibilities." Amelia felt her hopes collapsing as Hargrove seemed to be building toward another rejection, but then his expression changed slightly. "However," he continued, "operational necessity requires commanders to make decisions based on available assets, rather than personal preferences. Against my better judgment, I'm authorizing you for this demonstration." The words hit Amelia like an electric shock. After months of rejection and institutional resistance, Hargrove was actually giving her the opportunity she had been fighting for. "Furthermore," Hargrove added, his tone carrying unmistakable warning, "if you fail, if your innovative approaches prove inadequate under evaluation conditions, your military career will be permanently compromised. You'll never instruct advanced techniques again, and this failure will be used as evidence that traditional qualification requirements exist for valid reasons." Amelia straightened to full attention. "Sir, I understand completely. I won't fail." Hargrove studied her for another long moment. "Sergeant Reeves, you have 8 hours to complete demonstration preparation. Colonel Martinez will provide final briefing and parameter orientation. This demonstration begins at 0900 hours precisely." As the meeting concluded and officers began preparing for immediate execution, Amelia felt a mixture of exhilaration and terror. She had achieved what she had been working toward since joining the Corps, but under circumstances that made failure catastrophic, not just for her career, but for Marine Corps' representation in a crucially important joint service evaluation. Wilson approached her as they left the meeting room. "Amelia, you did it. You're actually getting the demonstration assignment. Now I have to prove that innovation can succeed where tradition might fail," Amelia replied. "Everything depends on the next few hours." 8 hours later, Amelia stood inside the massive Joint Service Training Center, running through her final mental checklist with the methodical precision that her father had taught her during their weekend training sessions when she was growing up. The demonstration area had been prepared according to Pentagon specifications, and in less than 30 minutes she would be representing Marine Corps' combat effectiveness before the most senior military leadership assembled in one location. Colonel Martinez completed her final briefing as support teams finished their facility preparations. "Sergeant Reeves, current parameters confirm that the Joint Chiefs are evaluating asymmetrical combat effectiveness across all service branches. Your demonstration window is approximately 25 minutes before the Army Rangers present their techniques. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story." Amelia studied the evaluation criteria one final time, mentally rehearsing the adaptive techniques she had developed during her unauthorized training sessions. Her combat experience allowed her to understand asymmetrical conflict at a level that purely traditional training couldn't provide, and she intended to use every advantage available. "Colonel, my demonstration incorporates leverage principles and momentum redirection that should maximize effectiveness against physically superior opponents while maintaining optimal positioning for defensive transitions," Amelia reported. "General." Hargrove approached the preparation area with an expression that mixed professional duty with personal skepticism. Despite authorizing the demonstration, His body language made it clear that he still doubted Amelia's ability to succeed where traditional techniques might fall short. "Sergeant Reeves," Hargrove said formally, "you're about to represent Marine Corps' combat doctrine before the Joint Chiefs and senior leadership from every service branch. Are you absolutely certain about your approach?" Amelia looked at the general with complete confidence. "Sir, my analysis shows that the evaluation criteria specifically emphasize asymmetrical effectiveness that conventional techniques weren't designed to address. Innovation isn't just preferable in this situation. It's necessary for optimal representation." Hargrove nodded grimly. "Sergeant, if you complete this demonstration successfully, you'll have proven that adaptive thinking can achieve results that established doctrine couldn't match. If you fail, you'll have confirmed that critical presentations require experienced instructors using proven methods." As Amelia moved to the demonstration area, she could see the assembled military leadership. In the observation section, generals and admirals from every service branch sat alongside senior Pentagon officials and combat veterans specifically selected to evaluate technique effectiveness. The Joint Chiefs themselves occupied the center section, with General Kerrigan positioned to oversee the entire evaluation process. The Pentagon's senior combat effectiveness advisor approached the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we begin evaluation of close-quarters combat techniques specifically designed for asymmetrical engagement scenarios. These demonstrations will inform joint service training protocols moving forward, with particular emphasis on effectiveness when facing physically superior opponents. First presenting will be the United States Marine Corps, represented by Sergeant Amelia Reeves." Amelia stepped onto the demonstration mat, her body relaxed but ready as the evaluators prepared their assessment criteria. She knew that every movement would be analyzed not just for technical execution, but for fundamental effectiveness against the specific scenarios the Joint Chiefs had prioritized. The lead evaluator signaled for the demonstration to begin, and Amelia launched into her prepared sequence. Instead of beginning with the traditional defensive postures that Corps' doctrine emphasized, she demonstrated innovative stances that maximized leverage against larger opponents while minimizing exposure to superior strength. Her first techniques addressed frontal attacks, showing precise movements that redirected an opponent's momentum rather than attempting to match their power directly. Each sequence flowed seamlessly into the next, demonstrating a systematic approach to asymmetrical combat that emphasized efficiency over strength. As the demonstration continued, Amelia could see growing interest among the evaluation team. These weren't just modifications to existing techniques, they represented fundamental rethinking of combat, principles specifically designed for the scenarios modern warriors increasingly faced in real-world operations. The most critical portion of her demonstration came when addressing multiple attackers with significant size and strength advantages. This was where traditional techniques typically showed their limitations, but Amelia's innovative approaches maintained consistent effectiveness regardless of the physical disparities involved. Throughout the demonstration, she provided clear, technical explanation that connected her innovative methods to fundamental combat principles. This wasn't about rejecting Corps' doctrine, it was about evolving established concepts to address changing operational requirements. As she completed her final sequence, Amelia could feel the evaluation team's focused attention. She had presented something they hadn't expected, not just competent execution of established techniques, but innovative thinking that addressed their specific evaluation criteria in ways traditional approaches couldn't match. "This concludes the Marine Corps demonstration," Amelia stated formally. "Thank you for your consideration." The lead evaluator stepped forward. "Sergeant Reeves, your demonstration showed significant innovation in addressing asymmetrical combat scenarios. Before we proceed to the next service presentation, General Kerrigan has a question." Amelia turned to face the Joint Chiefs representative, maintaining professional composure despite the unexpected development. Direct questioning during demonstrations was extremely rare. General Kerrigan studied her with experienced assessment. Sergeant Reeves, your techniques demonstrate significant departure from established Corps doctrine. Were these methods developed through official channels, or do they represent personal innovation? The question carried potential danger. Admitting to unauthorized development could undermine her demonstration's credibility, but claiming official sanction would be dishonest. General, Amelia replied with confidence born of absolute conviction. These techniques represent evolution of Corps fundamentals, specifically adapted to address the asymmetrical scenarios emphasized in your evaluation criteria. They combine established principles with combat-based innovations, designed to maximize effectiveness when traditional approaches might prove insufficient. Kerrigan nodded thoughtfully. And these adaptations, do they represent your personal combat philosophy, or broader Corps' evolution in asymmetrical training? The room fell completely silent. Every senior officer present understood the significance of this line of questioning. Kerrigan wasn't just evaluating technique effectiveness. He was assessing whether the Corps was institutionally embracing innovation, or whether Amelia represented an outlier in traditional doctrine. Amelia could see General Hargrove from the corner of her eye. His expression showed the tension of a commander whose institutional reputation rested on how his representative answered this critical question. General Kerrigan, Amelia said with careful precision, the Marine Corps has always valued effectiveness above orthodoxy. While these specific adaptations weren't part of standardized training when I began developing them, they represent the Corps' fundamental commitment to operational excellence through continuous evolution. Every Marine is taught that mission success requires adapting established principles to changing conditions. I've simply applied that core value to asymmetrical combat techniques. Her answer seemed to satisfy Kerrigan, who nodded with apparent approval. Thank you, Sergeant. Your demonstration was impressive. We'll proceed to the Army presentation. As Amelia left the demonstration area, she could feel the evaluation team's continued interest. She had presented something that clearly addressed their specific criteria in ways they hadn't expected from Marine Corps' representation. Colonel Martinez met her at the preparation area, her expression showing carefully controlled excitement. Sergeant Reeves, initial feedback from the evaluation team indicates extremely positive assessment. Your techniques demonstrated precisely the kind of innovation they were hoping to see. The demonstration succeeded because the situation required adaptive thinking rather than traditional approaches. Amelia replied professionally, though internally she felt overwhelming relief that her career-risking gamble had paid off. General Hargrove approached with an expression Amelia had never seen before: genuine respect, mixed with professional reassessment. Sergeant Reeves, preliminary evaluation notes indicate that your demonstration achieved the highest technical scores they've recorded for asymmetrical scenarios. Your innovative approaches succeeded where traditional techniques might have received significantly lower assessments. Amelia removed her demonstration gear and looked at the general who had dismissed her capabilities just hours earlier. Sir, the demonstration succeeded because innovation was necessary, not because traditional methods were inadequate in absolute terms. The evaluation criteria required adaptive thinking that conventional training hadn't specifically addressed. Hargrove nodded slowly. Sergeant Reeves, I owe you an apology. My assessment of your qualifications was based on institutional assumptions, rather than objective evaluation of capabilities. Your performance today demonstrated that experience matters less than analytical thinking when facing evolving challenges. Staff Sergeant Wilson approached with preliminary evaluation results. General, initial scoring indicates Sergeant Reeves' demonstration received the highest possible ratings for asymmetrical effectiveness. The evaluation team specifically noted innovative leverage applications and momentum redirection that exceeded their expectations for Corps representation. Colonel Martinez reviewed the feedback with obvious admiration. Sergeant Reeves' demonstration profile shows innovation in technique execution, physical efficiency, and tactical adaptation that exceeded all comparable presentations. Her performance under evaluation pressure demonstrated capabilities that standard training assessment methods hadn't identified. Amelia felt the weight of months of institutional resistance lifting from her shoulders, but her response remained professional. Sir, this demonstration succeeded because the situation required someone who could think differently, rather than someone who simply had more time in traditional roles. Hargrove studied her carefully. Sergeant Reeves, your approach to this evaluation challenges fundamental assumptions about qualification requirements and training protocols. Your success suggests that innovative thinking might be more valuable than extensive experience when facing challenges that conventional doctrine hasn't addressed. 3 hours later, as the Joint Service evaluation concluded, General Kerrigan personally approached the Marine Corps delegation. General Hargrove, the evaluation team has completed its preliminary assessment. Sergeant Reeves' demonstration received our highest possible ratings for asymmetrical combat effectiveness. Her innovative techniques will significantly influence Joint Service training protocols moving forward. Hargrove's expression showed the professional humility that comes from recognizing institutional assumptions that required reassessment. General Kerrigan, Sergeant Reeves represents the Corps' commitment to operational excellence through continuous evolution. Her performance today demonstrates our fundamental values in action. Kerrigan turned to Amelia directly. Sergeant Reeves, the evaluation team was particularly impressed by your systematic approach to asymmetrical scenarios. You didn't just demonstrate effective techniques, you presented coherent methodology that could transform how we train for modern combat realities. The Joint Chiefs would like you to consider leading an inter-service working group focused on asymmetrical combat instruction. The unexpected recognition hit Amelia with stunning impact. Not only had her demonstration succeeded beyond her highest expectations, but it had opened opportunities she hadn't even considered possible. Over the following weeks, Amelia's innovative techniques became the foundation for revised training. Programs that emphasized adaptive thinking alongside traditional fundamentals. Her demonstration methodology was studied by combat instructors across all service branches who recognized that modern warfare requires capabilities that established methods alone might not provide. 3 months later, Staff Sergeant Amelia Reeves received appointment as the Marine Corps' representative to the Joint Chiefs Asymmetrical Combat Training Initiative, with responsibility for developing instructors who could handle complex scenarios that required innovation rather than conventional approaches. Her first assignment was creating training protocols that combined combat experience with analytical thinking to produce warriors capable of adaptive performance under extreme pressure. General Hargrove became one of Amelia's strongest advocates, frequently telling other commanders that the most dangerous assumption military leaders could make was dismissing innovation based on conventional experience requirements rather than demonstrated capabilities and analytical thinking. His recommendation letter for Amelia's promotion emphasized that her success had proven the value of diverse perspectives in advanced combat instruction. During a training session 6 months after the Joint Service demonstration, Amelia addressed a group of combat instructors who included both experienced veterans seeking advanced certifications and recent graduates with exceptional potential. The most important lesson from modern combat instruction, Amelia told her students, isn't that innovation is better than experience, but that current challenges require both. Your technical knowledge and combat experience are valuable only when combined with the ability to think adaptively when facing situations that conventional training hasn't addressed. One of her students, Sergeant James Martinez, raised his hand. Staff Sergeant Reeves, how do we know when to trust innovative approaches instead of established procedures? Amelia smiled, remembering her father's advice about understanding that sometimes one demonstration can change perceptions across an entire organization. Sergeant Martinez, the answer isn't choosing between innovation and experience. It's understanding that true capability reveals itself when everything is on the line. Sometimes the most critical missions require people who can adapt established capabilities to address unprecedented challenges. As the training session concluded, Amelia reflected on how her career had been transformed by refusing to accept limitations based on conventional thinking rather than demonstrated capabilities. Her father had taught her that combat effectiveness wasn't just about executing techniques. It was about understanding fundamental principles while making adaptive decisions that could determine operational success under changing conditions. Today, Staff Sergeant Amelia "Phantom" Reeves leads the Corps' most advanced asymmetrical combat program, teaching Marines that mastery of sophisticated techniques requires understanding underlying principles rather than memorizing procedures, and that the most effective warriors often come from those who can think differently rather than those who simply have more time in traditional roles. Her students learn that success in modern warfare requires analytical thinking combined with adaptability when facing challenges that conventional training hasn't anticipated. Most importantly, they learn that the most dangerous limitations are often the ones imposed by institutional assumptions rather than objective assessment of capabilities. Amelia's story serves as a reminder that sometimes the most critical challenges require people who can innovate under pressure rather than those who follow established procedures, and that true capability often reveals itself when conventional approaches prove inadequate for unprecedented situations. The general who initially said she lacked the maturity for advanced instruction learned that experience without innovation can be less valuable than analytical thinking combined with adaptability. When everything is on the line, Amelia Reeves didn't just complete a successful demonstration. She proved that the most significant breakthroughs often come from those who are willing to challenge conventional wisdom when circumstances demand nothing less than revolutionary thinking. Her legacy continues to inspire military instructors who understand that sometimes changing organizational perception requires someone brave enough to prove that innovation matters more than institutional bias when protecting the values that matter most. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world. The journey of Staff Sergeant Amelia Reeves had only just begun. 6 months after her groundbreaking demonstration before the Joint Chiefs, Amelia found herself walking through the Pentagon's imposing corridors, her newly earned rank insignia still feeling somewhat foreign on her uniform. The Joint Service Combat Innovation Center sprawled before her, a state-of-the-art facility where instructors from all military branches collaborated to develop the next generation of combat techniques. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. As Director of Asymmetrical Combat Innovation, Amelia now commanded resources she could never have imagined during those difficult days at Whiteyman. Her team comprised 30 elite instructors drawn from across all service branches, each selected for their unique combination of combat experience and innovative thinking. Together, they were reshaping how America's warriors prepared for the evolving challenges of modern warfare. Admiral Catherine Sullivan, the Joint Chiefs representative overseeing the initiative, studied the training data on her tablet with evident satisfaction. At 62, Sullivan had broken numerous barriers throughout her distinguished career, becoming one of the military's most respected strategic thinkers and a fierce advocate for merit-based advancement regardless of gender or background. Staff Sergeant Reeves, these results are extraordinary, Sullivan noted, reviewing the performance metrics from recent field tests. Your adaptive techniques are showing consistent 70% improvement in asymmetrical engagement effectiveness across all participant demographics. The standardized implementation protocols you've developed are transforming how we approach combat instruction. Amelia nodded respectfully. Admiral, the credit belongs to our instructors. They've embraced the fundamental principle that effective combat techniques must evolve continuously to address changing operational requirements. Their willingness to question established assumptions while maintaining core effectiveness has driven our success. Sullivan's weathered face creased with a knowing smile. Don't undersell your contribution, Staff Sergeant. Your methodologies have revolutionized our approach. 6 months ago, most senior officers considered asymmetrical combat techniques specialized knowledge for niche operations. Today, they're becoming fundamental training components across all service branches. The conversation was interrupted by Lieutenant Colonel James Harrington, Amelia's deputy director and former Army Ranger instructor. Staff Sergeant, the demonstration teams are assembled for the Congressional Armed Services Committee presentation. General Hargrove has arrived with the Marine Corps delegation. Amelia felt a momentary tightening in her chest at the mention of Hargrove's name. Despite his eventual support following her successful Joint Chiefs demonstration, their relationship remained professionally cordial but distant. She had heard through unofficial channels that Hargrove had faced significant criticism from traditional-minded officers who considered his endorsement of her innovations a betrayal of established doctrine. "Thank you, Colonel. Please inform them I'll join momentarily," Amelia replied, turning back to Admiral Sullivan. "Ma'am, today's presentation represents 6 months of intensive development. The techniques we're demonstrating have been field validated across 17 different operational scenarios with consistent effectiveness regardless of physical disparities." Sullivan's expression grew serious. "Reeves, I don't need to tell you the significance of today's presentation. The Armed Services Committee determines next year's training allocation. Numerous traditional-minded members remain skeptical about redirecting resources from established programs toward your innovative approaches. They'll be looking for any weakness to justify maintaining conventional funding priorities." "I understand completely, Admiral. Our demonstration will provide objective evidence that innovative techniques deliver measurable performance improvements that conventional approaches can't match." As Amelia walked toward the demonstration facility, she reflected on how dramatically her professional journey had evolved. From fighting for basic recognition at Whiteman to directing a joint service initiative with congressional oversight, all within 6 months. The responsibility weighed heavily, but the opportunity to transform combat effectiveness through innovation drove her forward each day. The demonstration area had been configured to replicate realistic combat environments, with observation galleries positioned to provide committee members optimal viewing of the technical elements. Amelia recognized numerous senior officers and several congressional representatives known for their traditional views on military training. Their skeptical expressions made clear they weren't easily impressed by departures from established doctrine. General Hargrove stood with several Marine Corps officers, his weathered face showing the strain of navigating institutional politics. When he noticed Amelia, he nodded with professional respect, though his eyes carried a message she couldn't quite decipher. "Staff Sergeant Reeves," Hargrove said as she approached, "your program has generated significant attention throughout the Corps. Many senior instructors remain concerned about departing from established methodologies that have served us effectively for generations." Amelia recognized the diplomatic phrasing for what it was. Hargrove was under pressure from traditionalists. who saw her innovations as threatening decades of institutional doctrine. General, our approach doesn't replace fundamental principles. It adapts them to address evolving operational requirements. The effectiveness metrics speak for themselves. Hargrove nodded thoughtfully. Indeed they do. Which is precisely why I've authorized expansion of your methodologies into standard course training protocols. Despite considerable resistance, results matter more than comfort with established procedures. Before Amelia could respond, Congressman Richard Thornton approached, his expression carrying the skepticism of someone predetermined to find fault. At 67, Thornton had served in Vietnam before his political career and remained firmly committed to traditional military doctrine. His position as senior member of the Armed Services Committee made him particularly influential in training allocation decisions. Staff Sergeant Reeves, Thornton began without preamble, I've reviewed your program documentation. Your approach seems to prioritize technical innovation over the disciplined fundamentals that have produced effective warriors throughout American military history. Amelia met his gaze directly. Congressman, our program maintains absolute fidelity to fundamental combat principles. What we've developed are adaptive applications that address the specific challenges modern warriors face in asymmetrical engagement. Scenarios. The metrics demonstrate consistent effectiveness across all participant demographics, regardless of size or strength disparities. Thornton's expression remained unconvinced. Metrics can be manipulated, Staff Sergeant. Real combat effectiveness comes from warriors with the discipline to execute established techniques under extreme pressure. Innovations without proven field effectiveness risk lives when operations go sideways, which is precisely why every technique we're demonstrating today has been field validated in actual combat operations, Amelia replied confidently. Our instructors include decorated operators from all service branches who have successfully implemented these methodologies in high-threat environments. Congressman Elena Martinez, the committee's second-ranking member, joined the conversation. At 53, Martinez had earned respect for her data-driven approach to military policy, focusing on measurable effectiveness rather than institutional tradition. Perhaps we should let the demonstration speak for itself, Richard. Objective assessment seems preferable to theoretical debate. As committee members took their observation positions, Amelia gathered her demonstration teams for final preparation. The 30 instructors represented America's most elite warriors, Rangers, SEALs, Marine Recon, Air Force combat controllers, each selected for their exceptional combination of combat experience and innovative thinking. Today isn't about proving traditional methods wrong, Amelia reminded them quietly. It's about demonstrating that adaptive thinking can enhance fundamental effectiveness when facing evolving challenges. Every technique must show clear connection to established principles while demonstrating measurable performance improvements. Master Sergeant David Chen, a decorated Army Ranger with 3 Purple Hearts, nodded in agreement. We're not replacing tradition, we're evolving it to address changing operational requirements. Effectiveness is the only standard that matters when lives are on the line. The demonstration began with systematic comparison between traditional techniques and adaptive innovations across 17 different combat scenarios. Each sequence showed clear connection between established fundamentals and evolved applications, with objective measurement of effectiveness against resistance, speed of execution, and performance under stress. Amelia narrated throughout, explaining technical elements with precision while emphasizing practical application in real-world operations. The demonstration wasn't theoretical exhibition, it was evidence-based presentation of combat effectiveness developed through systematic evaluation and field validation. As the sequences progressed, Amelia could see growing interest among committee members who had arrived skeptical but were clearly recognizing the practical value of adaptive thinking when addressing asymmetrical scenarios. Even Congressman Thornton, appeared to be reassessing his initial position as objective measurements demonstrated consistent performance improvements across all demonstration categories. The most compelling portion came when instructors demonstrated defensive techniques against multiple attackers with significant size and strength advantages. Traditional methods showed respect-worthy effectiveness, but clear limitations under extreme disparities. Adaptive innovations maintained consistent performance regardless of physical differences, precisely the capability modern operations increasingly required. Throughout the demonstration, Amelia emphasized that their approach wasn't revolutionary rejection of established principles, but evolutionary adaptation to address changing requirements. This wasn't about discarding traditions that had served warriors effectively for generations. It was about enhancing fundamental effectiveness through innovative application. As the demonstration concluded, Admiral Sullivan stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you've observed today represents 6 months of intensive development and field validation. The performance metrics demonstrate consistent effectiveness across all operational parameters, with particular emphasis on scenarios that conventional approaches struggle to address adequately." Congressman Martinez spoke first. "Admiral, the performance improvements are undeniable. Staff Sergeant Reeves' program appears to enhance combat effectiveness, precisely where our operational requirements have evolved most significantly in recent years." Thornton's response surprised everyone. "I arrived skeptical, believing this program represented unnecessary departure from established doctrine. However, the objective measurements are compelling. These techniques maintain fundamental principles while adapting them to address evolving requirements. That's not revolution, it's responsible evolution." General Hargrove stepped forward, his weathered face showing a mixture of professional pride and personal realization. "Ladies and gentlemen, when Staff Sergeant Reeves first proposed innovative approaches to combat instruction, I dismissed her recommendations based on institutional assumptions rather than objective assessment. Today's demonstration proves that innovation combined with respect for fundamental principles produces measurable performance improvements that benefit all warriors, regardless of physical characteristics." The committee's subsequent questions focused on implementation protocols, instructor qualification requirements, and performance validation methodologies, all indications that they were considering substantive program expansion rather than questioning fundamental value. The skepticism that had permeated the observation gallery had transformed into pragmatic consideration of how these innovations could enhance overall combat effectiveness. As the committee members departed for closed-door deliberation, Admiral Sullivan approached Amelia with evident satisfaction. "Staff Sergeant, you've accomplished something remarkable today. Transforming institutional skepticism into programmatic support typically takes years of incremental progress. You've achieved it in 6 months through compelling demonstration of measurable effectiveness." Amelia nodded respectfully. "Admiral, success came from maintaining absolute fidelity to fundamental principles while demonstrating that adaptive application enhances their effectiveness. We never presented innovation as replacement for established doctrine, only as evolution to address changing requirements." Sullivan smiled knowingly. "That balanced approach is precisely why you've succeeded where others have failed. Rejecting tradition alienates institutional stakeholders. Refusing innovation compromises operational effectiveness. Finding the productive middle ground between respect for established principles and adaptive thinking to address evolving challenges. That's the leadership quality that distinguishes your program." General Hargrove approached as Sullivan departed, his expression carrying complexity that transcended simple professional assessment. "Staff Sergeant Reeves, your demonstration today was exceptional. The committee members who arrived most skeptical departed most impressed. That's the hallmark of compelling evidence." "Thank you, General. Coming from you, that assessment carries particular significance. Hargrove's weathered face showed unexpected vulnerability. "I owe you something more substantial than professional validation, Sergeant. I owe you a personal apology. 6 months ago, I dismissed your capabilities based on institutional assumptions rather than objective assessment. That wasn't just professionally incorrect, it was personally unjust." The unexpected admission caught Amelia completely off guard. Throughout her military career, she had encountered numerous senior officers who maintained institutional biases, regardless of objective evidence. Hargrove's willingness to acknowledge his error represented rare personal courage. "General, your support following the Joint Chiefs demonstration has been instrumental in establishing program credibility. Your willingness to reconsider initial assessment based on objective evidence demonstrates the kind of leadership the Corps needs." Hargrove shook his head slightly. "You're being gracious, Sergeant. My initial resistance wasn't based on objective assessment, it was institutional bias that I should have recognized and corrected. The most dangerous limitation any leader can impose is refusing to consider capability based on preconception rather than demonstrated performance." Before Amelia could respond, Lieutenant Colonel Harrington approached with news that would transform the program's trajectory. "Staff Sergeant, the committee has reached preliminary decision. They're recommending full implementation across all service branches with expanded funding allocation." Congressman Thornton specifically cited compelling objective evidence of enhanced combat effectiveness as justification for prioritized resource allocation. The announcement represented validation beyond anything Amelia had anticipated. Institutional transformation that typically required decades of incremental progress had been accomplished in months through systematic demonstration of measurable effectiveness. The implications extended far beyond program expansion. This represented fundamental reassessment of how combat innovation should be evaluated and implemented. 3 weeks later, Amelia stood before the assembled combat instructors at the newly established Joint Service Combat Innovation Academy. The facility represented unprecedented commitment to developing adaptive techniques that maintained fundamental principles while evolving applications to address changing operational requirements. Instructors from all service branches would train together, sharing diverse perspectives while maintaining unified focus on measurable combat effectiveness. "Welcome to the Innovation Academy," Amelia began, addressing 200 of America's most elite warriors. "What we're building here isn't replacement for established doctrine that has served our nation effectively for generations. We're developing evolutionary applications that enhance fundamental effectiveness when facing evolving challenges." She gestured toward the training areas where instructors would develop and validate new techniques. "Everything we do maintains absolute fidelity to core principles. The only acceptable measurement is objective effectiveness under operational conditions. Theory without practical application has no place in combat instruction." Captain Michael Thompson, a decorated Navy SEAL instructor, raised his hand. "Staff Sergeant, how do we balance respect for established doctrine with innovative thinking when traditional approaches have proven effective for decades?" Amelia smiled at the question that perfectly captured the program's central challenge. "Captain, the answer isn't choosing between tradition and innovation. It's understanding that true combat effectiveness comes from maintaining fundamental principles while adapting applications to address changing requirements. Our institutional strength comes from respecting established doctrine while continuously improving its implementation." As the orientation session concluded, Admiral Sullivan approached with news that would elevate the program's impact throughout the military establishment. "Staff Sergeant Reeves, the Joint Chiefs have approved your nomination for the newly established Combat Innovation Medal. The citation specifically recognizes your exceptional contributions to enhancing warrior effectiveness through innovative application of fundamental principles. The presentation ceremony is scheduled for next month at the Pentagon." The recognition represented validation beyond professional achievement. It established institutional acknowledgement that innovation combined with respect for fundamental principles represented the balanced approach modern military operations required. The medal wasn't just personal recognition. It was programmatic validation that would enhance implementation across all service branches. That evening, as Amelia reviewed training protocols in her office, General Hargrove arrived with unexpected news. "Staff Sergeant, I've just come from meeting with the Commandant. Effective immediately, you're promoted to Gunnery Sergeant with assignment as Marine Corps representative to the Joint Combat Innovation Command. Additionally, your adaptive techniques have been incorporated into standard training protocols for all Marine combat instructors." The announcement represented transformation beyond anything Amelia had imagined possible. In less than a year, she had progressed from fighting for basic recognition to directing joint service innovation with Corps-wide implementation. More importantly, her methodologies were enhancing combat effectiveness for warriors regardless of physical characteristics, democratizing operational capability through adaptive application of fundamental principles. General, this represents institutional transformation that typically requires years of incremental progress. Hargrove nodded thoughtfully. The timeline accelerated because your approach maintained absolute respect for fundamental principles, while demonstrating measurable performance improvements. You never presented innovation as replacement for established doctrine, only as evolution to address changing requirements. That balanced approach overcame institutional resistance that would have rejected revolutionary change. 6 months later, Gunnery Sergeant Amelia Reeves stood before 300 combat instructors from 17 allied nations at the International Combat Effectiveness Symposium. Her presentation, Evolutionary Innovation, Enhancing Fundamental Effectiveness Through Adaptive Application, represented American leadership in developing modern combat techniques that maintained traditional principles while addressing evolving operational requirements. As allied instructors demonstrated their own innovative approaches, Amelia reflected on the journey that had transformed her career and military training doctrine. The critical insight hadn't been revolutionary rejection of established principles, but evolutionary enhancement through adaptive application. Success came from maintaining respect for fundamental doctrine, while continuously improving its implementation to address changing requirements. During the symposium's concluding session, Admiral Sullivan announced the program's next phase. The Joint Chiefs have authorized establishment of the International Combat Innovation Initiative, with Gunnery Sergeant Reeves serving as inaugural director. This multinational program will develop standardized techniques that enhance warrior effectiveness across allied forces while maintaining each service's fundamental principles. The appointment represented recognition beyond national boundaries, acknowledgement that Amelia's balanced approach to innovation offered template for enhancing combat effectiveness throughout allied military operations. The initiative would bring together elite instructors from partner nations, creating collaborative development process that respected diverse traditions while enhancing unified capability. As Amelia addressed the multinational instructors who would form the initiative's core team, she emphasized the principle that had transformed institutional resistance into programmatic support. Our strength comes from maintaining absolute fidelity to fundamental principles while continuously improving their application. We don't replace established doctrine, we enhance its effectiveness through adaptive thinking that addresses evolving requirements. 1 year after her career-risking demonstration before General Hargrove, Gunnery Sergeant Amelia Phantom Reeves had transformed how military organizations approached combat innovation. Her balanced methodology maintaining respect for established principles while developing adaptive applications had overcome institutional resistance that would have rejected revolutionary change. More importantly, her approach had democratized Combat effectiveness regardless of physical characteristics, enhancing warrior capability through techniques that maintained consistent performance despite asymmetrical disparities. The implications extended beyond military operations into institutional culture, demonstrating that traditional values and innovative thinking weren't contradictory but complementary when properly balanced. Today, combat instructors throughout Allied forces learn Amelia's central insight. True effectiveness comes from maintaining fundamental principles while continuously improving their application through adaptive thinking. Her legacy continues influencing military operations worldwide, reminding warriors that institutional strength comes from balanced approach that respects established values while embracing innovation to address evolving challenges. The general, who once dismissed her capabilities based on institutional assumptions, now serves as her strongest advocate, frequently telling senior officers that the most dangerous limitation any leader can impose is refusing to consider innovation-based on preconception rather than demonstrated effectiveness. Hargrove's professional courage in acknowledging his error demonstrated the kind of leadership that enhances institutional strength through continuous improvement. Amelia Reeves' journey from rejected instructor to international program director serves as powerful reminder that transformative innovation doesn't require rejecting established principles, only enhancing their application through adaptive thinking that addresses evolving requirements. Her story continues inspiring military leaders who understand that institutional strength comes from balanced approach that respects tradition while embracing innovation when operational effectiveness demands nothing less than continuous improvement. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.